This year was so confusing. It was both one of the best years of my life, just based on one thing, and the worst year of my life, and will forever remain the worst year. My mother's health started to worsen a lot more. She'd often cough so much to the point that she'd end up shaking and not even realise it. She couldn't breathe properly because of the COPD, and in the end, it proved to be too much for her body to be able to handle. February the 12th, 2015 soon arrived. I had gone into her room to see if she needed anything from the shop, like some smokes or anything to eat, to which she just mumbled, so I assumed that she did. I took some money out of her purse, and I had gone over to our local shop to get said things, along with some energy drinks and some smokes for myself, which I'd often do. I came back from the shop, and I had dropped her things off and retreated into my bedroom, where I would stay for most of the day, until roughly about 6 PM, because that was a time of the day that Beck would usually pop around for a couple hours. Beck had arrived, and I went into my mother's bedroom, because we'd often sit in there and chill for a bit, and as far as I'm aware, my mother was sleeping. So my usual self, I'd say, "Wake up, you lazy fucker," but something didn't feel right. She looked off. So I walked up to her and patted her on the head. No, not like you would do to a dog, but just hard enough to wake her up. Except she wasn't waking up. She was cold. At this point, I started getting massively concerned. Beck noticed, and she looked at my mother and said, "What does she want me to do?" "Ring Sam," I said, without hesitation. Even though I should have said, "Ring the paramedics," but by this point, what the fuck were they going to do, except announce the obvious? Ringing Sam was my first initial instinct. I can't remember clearly what was said on the phone, because by that point, I started to panic, my eyes showing more fear than they have ever had in my lifetime. All I can remember was Beck saying to Sam over the phone, "You need to come over to your mum's," and he must have said he'll pop over later or some shit like that, because Beck, I distinctly remember saying, "No, you need to come over now." I can never remember if she explained why he needed to come over on the phone that night, or if he just recognised the urgency in Beck's voice, but he came over the moment he hung up the phone. Me and Beck just left the bedroom and went into the front room to wait for Sam and Sean to arrive. Again, we probably should have rang the paramedics, but it was clear as day by that point she was already gone. Sam and Sean arrives, and Sean stayed with me and Beck in the front room, while Sam went straight into my mother's bedroom, and all I could hear was Sam saying, Mum, wake up." Actually, come to think about it, I do think Beck mentioned to Sam on the phone earlier that Mother wasn't waking up, or we couldn't get her to wake up. It's crazy how much your mind holds back little information until you think of something else, then all the little memories come flooding through. My memory, however, has definitely shut a lot of what happened next out, probably as a coping mechanism. The next thing I remember was clearing a lot of shit out of the way so we can get her onto the floor, so Sam can perform basic CPR on her, and at that moment I kinda just switched off from reality and looked at things as I was moving them out the way and saying, "Fuck, I ain't seen this in ages." I was supposed to be clearing a section of the floor, not admiring shit, but it's just one of those things that happens. I don't know if that was just a way of coping with what was going on, or some kind of disbelief at what was happening, but I remember the ambulance being called after we had gotten Mother off of her bed and onto the floor. From that point on, the paramedics arrived. Sam stayed with them until the moment I guess we was all dreading. Sam had come through to our living room and said she was gone. I couldn't and I didn't want to believe it. I was in my room when I just broke. If you're British and have seen the episode or the meme from EastEnders of when Ian Beale broke down in Phil Mitchell's arms and he was kicking and flailing about, I was pretty much like that, stomping my feet and all. I guess it was the last time that I ever had a childlike temper tantrum when it comes to something to do with my mother. I was so broken. From what I can recall, it was Sam and Sean that contacted most of the family to inform them of Mother's passing. From what I know, Ed had been told, then told my auntie, and all she could say was, "What?" out of disbelief over the news, from which point he had gone to the boys next door to him and broke down. All I had to do was contact my dad and his then missus, the mother of my brother, Sue. I couldn't get a hold of them, so I rang my former stepmother. I couldn't talk, so Beck had to do all the talking and informed her of Mother's passing, and that she needs to inform Dad and Sue because we can't get a hold of them, to which she did, which I'm extremely thankful for, because it was difficult to talk at all, but to inform them both of the passing would have been an extremely hard challenge to do. Beck had her mother come over to give me a couple of pouches of tobacco from the shop that came out of my holiday funds, which, to be completely honest, I was supposed to be saving up for, but I didn't care at that point. I knew I was going to smoke at least a minimum of 50 cigarettes a day, and I knew I was going to need the tobacco to be able to do that. Smoking tobacco in general is a bad thing, but stress smoking is a lot worse, because you can't really control how much you smoke. I was actually quote-unquote forced to go stay at Beck's for a while, because she wouldn't allow me to stay in my place after what had just happened, which was understandable, I guess. It was at that time that either Beck or Sean had said to me and Sam to give each other a hug, because we were going to need each other. We did, Then Shan turned around and said, "Well, that's weird to see," which was funny. So I had to give thanks to her for bringing a little light into what was a really dark moment in my life. The following day, it was time to post it on Facebook in case there was any non-immediate family members that didn't know of her passing. "I can't believe you're gone. You were such an inspiration to me. Always tried your best at giving everyone what they felt they needed. Such a beautiful soul. I miss you. I love you. I'll never forget you or the love you gave me and so many others. You can rest easy now. Sleep tight, man." That was probably the hardest Facebook post that I have ever had to post. I will continue to be so for a good while yet. Over the coming weeks I had broken down many times. I've gone through all the stages of grief, disbelief, sadness, anger, and even more sadness, and eventually the overcoming of it all. March 2nd, 2015 was the final day that we would all be in the same room together. It was time to officially say our goodbyes to the greatest woman that has ever graced our soil, and I was really not looking forward to it. Not often do I dress smartly, but today was an important day and I had to. If anything, to just show my respect to a great mother, a great auntie, a great daughter, a great friend, a great woman. A life well lived, and a beautiful send-off into her final journey home. This will not be the last time that we will all have to gather in one room to say goodbye to a loved one in 2015. 2015 was the year that my dream had finally became reality. As you all are aware of by now, I am very much into ancient Egypt, and my lifelong dream had always been to visit the land of the pharaohs. As a late birthday present, Beck had booked a holiday originally to Luxor, Egypt for a week. We had all sorts planned, and it was only until a couple of months beforehand that we had to rebook our holiday because shit was kicking off in Luxor. At that point of being told this, I thought, well, guess it will forever remain a dream. But luckily, all we had to do was just book into a different hotel in a different city. So instead of staying in Luxor, we stayed in the Caribbean World Resort in Hurghada. I've been to a lot of resorts and hotels, but that was and will always be my favourite, especially in terms of how nice the staff was, how relaxing the scenery and all was. Although originally it was meant to be from the 1st of July to the 7th of July when we had to switch hotels and shit, our dates had changed and our holiday ended up actually being from the 3rd of July to the 10th of July instead. A little hiccup in our holiday plans, but it wasn't as dramatic as I made it out to be when we was told that we couldn't go and stay in Luxor. It was such a fucking awesome experience getting to visit Egypt. Some of the things we had planned, excursions if you will, was visiting the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, visiting the Great Pyramids of Giza, along with the Sphinx, visiting the Valley of the Kings, Queen Hatshepsut's temple, or as it is also known, Deir el-Bahari, or Northern Monastery, among a bunch of other cool stuff, such as seeing the Colossi of Memnon, and going to a papyrus shop where they make papyruses and papyrus paintings. During this holiday, I would meet some cool individuals, and some that would pester me to buy things I didn't want nor need. One of which would get their way, and I caved in and paid 200 Egyptian pounds for it. Was I annoyed? Yeah. But I guess my barter skills was far from being great, so I only had myself to blame for that one. The guy got what he wanted, and I never seen him again after that, despite his shop being on the resort grounds, and we often went around that side of the resort. These things happen, and I moved on from it. Other than that, I was pretty happy with my experience all in all, and would definitely go to the same resort again, without a doubt in mind. For most of the time there, we would just chill in our hotel room to cool off from the stuffy heat, or we would go down by the pool. One thing that pissed us off a bit though, was we had booked a quad bike ride in the desert for a few hours on a Sunday, I think it was. And we had gotten up early and had gone to the hotel reception area, where we were meant to meet with the people in charge, and they never showed up. So we lost that excursion. We weren't even informed as to why they never showed up either. It wasn't even like we could go to our holiday rep either, because we didn't even have one. Which is odd, but oh well. We knew what we were doing, so we just cut our losses and relaxed by the pool for a bit. Well, I did. Beck swam for a bit. No swimming for me. Nope, not a chance. I learned that I ain't a strong swimmer, and I don't do any water areas that's above my waist with me floating. I learned that lesson in high school when I nearly drowned. Most of the time we was there, we were just mostly chilling, but on 8th of July 2015, we woke up early, had a lift to the Hurghada airport, and got on a plane to Cairo. It was a comfortable 1 or so hour flight, in which during the flight over to Cairo, I'm fairly certain the pilot mentioned that if we looked out the window, we could see the pyramids. I didn't actually look. I kept that inner suspense for when we was actually going to the pyramids that day. I can't quite remember the order of things in which we would visit, but that day we went to the pyramids, the Sphinx, and the Cairo Museum. We had gotten into a car and drove up to the pyramids as they started coming to view, and what a view it was. I remember turning to Beck with the biggest grin on my face and saying, "Look, it's the pyramids." I was like a pig in shit, really in my element. As we drove closer, the pyramids got bigger and bigger and bigger, just as did the smile that was forming on my face. It was such a surreal moment seeing them with my own eyes in person, because up until that point, I had only seen them in books and on TV. While it's still crazy to look at them in picture form, it's only until you see them in person that you truly grasp the awe-inspiring aura that the pyramids gives off. After all, they are the only ancient wonders of the world that are still standing in modern times. Then came the moment that our tour guide asked us if we all wanted to go inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. He did warn us that if we were to be known to suffer with heart diseases or breathing problems, that it wasn't advised. I had obviously been smoking for roughly 6 years by that point, more heavily in the months following from the mother's passing, but I really didn't care. I was not passing up that opportunity, and so I agreed to it, without any hesitation at all. We had all walked up to the Great Pyramid and saw the opening inside that we were walking to climb up to the burial chamber of the Pharaoh Khufu. It was so fucking tiring, but in the end, it was totally worth it. We did some chanting in the burial chamber with Khufu's sarcophagus beside us, a truly amazing experience, and one that I won't ever forget. The experiences that I had in Egypt wasn't always great though, and one of the not so great experiences came on the same day as when I went into the pyramids, around the same time as well. People trying to sell you things as good and all, they have to make a living somehow. But this one man was not taking no for an answer. He tried selling me a headdress and some makeshift beetle figures. I had told him no, I don't want to buy these things, but he kept trying to sell them to me. Took the headdress out and started putting it on me, and I again told him no. He got in an asshole mood and muttered some shit to me in Arabic. I, obviously not being a speaker of the Arabic language, didn't know what he had said, but by his mannerisms, I had a rough idea. However, I didn't care and just moved on. From that point on, we had gone to see the Sphinx and took some photos there. It didn't seem nearly as big in person as I thought it would have been, but the architecture of it all was a sight to behold. Then came the moment that we went to the museum. I had a chance to go to the mummy exhibits, where the mummies of the long dead kings and queens laid, but I chose not to. This would not be the first time that I had a chance to do something and chosen beforehand not to on this holiday. We had seen a bunch of artifacts during our visit to the museum in Cairo. My favourite ones by far was the ones found in King Tutankhamun's tomb back in November of 1922. Unfortunately, from what I can recall, we had to pay extra to gain entry to what was known as a Tutankhamun exhibit, where his famous funerary death mask and all the top treasures on in his tomb were on display, which, of course, we didn't pay. So I never really got to see the mask and the rest of his treasures up close. However, I did manage to get a glimpse of his mask via seeing it through the door. That was the closest to the boy king that I more than likely would ever get. After we had all seen what we wanted to see, me and Beck had gone outside to a little rest area with some benches and tables and sat and basked in the Egyptian air until it was time to leave again. During that time, we had a few visitors come over to us, a bunch of cats which we fussed for a little bit before leaving the museum. Our holiday wasn't over. The following day after our trip to Cairo, we had another long journey, this time a 7-hour drive to Luxor. As much as I loved and will always cherish my visit to Cairo and the pyramids, it'll always be my time in Luxor that will be my favourite moment of the Egypt holiday for many reasons. During this excursion, there was me, Beck, our tour guide, who was actually decent and funny. Got some basic information wrong, however, and anyone with some knowledge on certain topics of ancient Egypt would pick up on that misinformation, and a few others. Everybody on that excursion was decent enough, very chatty, kind of felt like a school trip with a few of your school friends. By the end of it, we didn't all feel like complete strangers. We had all visited the place where they would make papyrus and paintings on them. We had someone then tell us the methods and steps it would have taken not only the ancient Egyptian civilization, but also modern Egyptians when it comes to paper making. It was really fascinating. I would have loved to buy some pre-made papyrus and drawings, but we didn't bring the cash with us there. But it is what it is. During this day, we would also go to the Colossi of Memnon, which is where 2 giant statues built or made to be built by the pharaoh Amenhotep III. They were situated in front of his mortuary temple, which has since been ruined. Well, both statues and the temple has been ruined. The temple more anyway. The ancient Egyptians' abilities to craft such massive monuments and temples has never failed to astonish me, but seeing these type of builds up close had me questioning it even more, all the way from seeing the pyramids to seeing Karnak Temple. Obviously the Karnak Temple was constructed over the course of multiple reigns and multiple years, but their attention to detail when it comes to measurements and being able to do it with very little tools is still an amazing ability that I will always be amazed by. Seeing the amazing details on the stone walls took me by surprise. It felt like the truest of honours to walk amongst the hallways and pathways of Karnak Temple. I even found myself trailing my finger along the dentations of the hieroglyphs on certain parts of the wall in Karnak Temple. Should I have? Was it the right thing to do? Maybe, maybe not. I just know that I couldn't help myself. I couldn't believe my eyes and had to touch the walls just to be like, yep, this is 100% real. I am really seeing something that I never thought I would in my entire life. Shortly after visiting Karnak Temple, we had gone to the other side of the river Nile and hopped onto a bus to take us all the way to the Valley of the Kings, the place where many pharaohs were buried. most famously the Boy King Tutankhamun. We had been granted the chance to go inside of 3 tombs as a one-time payment. I can't exactly remember whose tombs they belonged to without looking up pictures online. I know we went into one of the Ramses' tomb, which was Ramses. I haven't got a clue. However, during our time in one of the 3 tombs visits, I had a guy walk around with me explaining about different war paintings and all of that. I did not ask him to, and nor did I need him to. I knew everything he had already said, and afterwards he expected a payment. I mean no disrespect, but pal, I already knew the shit you told me. I did not ask for your assistance, and I did not need it, so no, I was not going to pay you anything. Should I have needed some information, then yeah, maybe you might have gotten some money. Before we had entered into the valley itself, while getting the entrance tickets, we were asked if we wanted to go inside the tomb of King Tutankhamun. We would have had to pay for a separate entry ticket. Understandable, considering to the outside world, it's the most famous due to all the treasures and the myths that came from the discovery back over 100 years ago. Beck turned to me and asked me if I wanted to get a ticket. I declined. Even though I quite often say that I don't regret my decisions in life, I kinda do regret that one, just in the slightest. Beck looked a little surprised that I turned the offer down, because she knew how much I always wanted to walk down the 16 steps and see King Tutankhamun's burial chamber, to see the Boy King himself, being the only discovered pharaoh still laying in his tomb. While that is all true, a part of me just didn't really want to. All my life as an ancient Egyptian enthusiast, I have always talked with my mother about going to Egypt one day. I have always talked to her about my passions. She was always there from day one, pushing me to live my dreams. Even up until her death earlier that year, we would often sit in her room talking about it, and when Beck said that my birthday present from 2014 was going to be a holiday to Egypt in 2015, all 3 of us would talk about the holiday and what Beck's and I's plans were. It just didn't feel right, living that important part of my dream and not having my mum around anymore to talk about it. It was an extremely difficult choice I had to make, one that I, still to this day, think was the right choice. Who knows, maybe sometime in the future I may get that chance again, and things may or may not be different. But until that day comes, I'm okay with not having gone down into King Tut's tomb that day. Once we were all done going through the tombs and relaxing in the shade to get away from the scorching hot sun, we hopped back into the bus and drove to the other side of the valley to visit the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, also known as Deir el-Bahari. I was honestly dumbfounded by just how beautiful the temple was, let alone how big it was too. We had walked up its ramps and just sat in the shade for about 30 minutes or so, while people talked, took photos and just relaxed. It was an amazing end to the day when the sun started to set and the air was cooling down. We got into the bus, made our way back over to the River Nile via a small boat, and then got into another bus to drive us all back to our respective resorts, saying goodbye to everyone as they had gotten off the bus. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't kind of sad, seeing everyone leave after getting to know them and enjoying what was the best day of my life with really good company. But forwards and onwards we must go. That was our last full day in Egypt. For the following day, we would get ready to take the 5-hour flight back home to the freezing cold climate of the United Kingdom. Okay, it wasn't that cold. However, we have gotten used to the stuffy climate of Egypt, so anything colder than 30 degrees Celsius is automatically winter weather like. I remember staying pretty much quiet on the journey home, just thinking back on the amazing week I had had with the one person that, at the time, I wouldn't have wanted to spend living with my dream more. I remember coming back to my cold, lonely flat and just saying, I did it, Mum. I finally lived my dream, hoping that there is a life after death, that she was there beside me throughout the whole holiday, hoping she was experiencing it all with me. Over the coming last half of 2015, a select few things had happened that I feel like has been big in terms of what has gone on that year. About 10 or so days after I had come back from our holiday in Egypt, Malcolm decided to move in with me so that I didn't lose the flat due to its little residence for the amount of bedrooms my flat had. It was only meant to be temporary then. However, close to 9 years later, he still lives with me, which is crazy to think about because so much has happened in these past 9 years, but yet it all just seemed to have just blown by. Honestly, would not have changed those 9 years for anything. Okay, so I stated earlier on in this chapter, my mother's funeral wasn't going to be the last time in 2015 where we would all be in one room saying goodbye to a loved one. Let me give a little backstory. So in 2014, my grandfather had a fall and had to be taken into hospital. It actually took him a while to get out of there, but the moment he got back to his home, I believe it was around Christmas time that year, he had become extremely less independent. Up until that point, he was a man who would do things by himself, for himself, and would rarely like it when people would do things for him. However, it was around the time that he came out that he had to be put into a care home. I remember telling my mother that the moment he goes into a care home, was the moment that we say goodbye to him. I knew from that point he wasn't going to last a year. Spoiler, he didn't. Just as my mother's health did, my grandfather's health deteriorated. He ended up with dementia, which I'm sure you all know what that is. But for those of you who don't, dementia is a mental illness that can cause your personality to change and cause you to lose memories and forget who people are. It's a cruel, cruel disease that nobody should ever have to live with. It's the one thing that I fear to ever happen to me. I live on my memories. I'm often looking back on them and smiling fondly and wouldn't ever want to lose that. However, my grandfather did. In September 2015, Malcolm, Ed, Sam, Beck and myself went up to see my granddad in a care home. The man was a shell of his former self, skin and bones and bedridden, still complaining in his typical fashion. Yet the only way I recognised him was from the mole that he had on his neck. I honestly don't think he knew who I was, which fucking sucked, and I had to go out of the room and just have a breather. I've always had a rocky relationship with my granddad, but as I do with the rest of my family, I love the man. Exactly 1 week later, after visiting him, Sam had come over to mine while I was asleep. He walked into my room and woke me up saying, "Dude, Bampy has passed away." Fun fact, my grandfather used to sign Christmas and birthday cards as Grampy, but Ed, when he was a child, couldn't pronounce the G and kept saying Bampy. From then on, it stuck. Even in my earlier woken state, I just responded with, "He's gone as well, is he?" To which Sam said, "Yeah," and that Bampy had passed away that morning. I fucking knew it. I knew he would not last a year in that fucking place. He was already a shell of his former self when we first went into the care home. And with losing my mother, I feel like he just gave up. Last time I ever saw my grandfather was on Sunday the 20th of September 2015. He started his final journey home on Sunday the 27th September 2015. I posted the announcement on my Facebook. R.I.P. Bampy. I can't believe you're gone from us as well. Gonna miss you. Sleep well, big guy. October the 6th, 2015 was the day where we laid the big man to rest. It was the last time we would all have to come under one roof to say goodbye to a loved one. I know one day we will all have to do it again, but fingers crossed it won't be for a good while. I don't believe in mediums per se. I think a majority of the time they're just con artists trying to make a quick buck using people's sadness and vulnerability. However, this one fucking medium really caught me off guard. What's even stranger was this specific medium would charge money, but everything he gained from it would go straight into charity. He even knew little details about shit. He knew I was having problems with my dad and his missus at the time. He knew the layout of my flat. Granted, that alone could be easily debunked by the fact that most places in this area have a very similar layout with rooms and shit. Yet, he knew exactly which room was my mother's bedroom. Now, maybe he could have worked that out because it was the master bedroom, which would make sense. But it seemed to have gotten that information bang on straight away. No second guessing it. He even questioned things such as my siblings, saying something along the lines of, "You're sisters, correct?" Which once I responded saying that I do, he just went on to say, as if to say, "Yeah, I know." Basic trivial stuff. Most people do tend to have sisters, which is the norm. Yet, it wasn't long after, maybe a month or something later, I first got in contact with two of my sisters, randomly out of the blue. This guy even mentioned the name of a friend, one I don't recognise. Something like Tristan or Archibald or some fucking shit like that apparently ended their life. They supposedly knew me, but the name given to me that evening was one that I didn't know. Even to this day I'm thinking, who the fuck could that person be? Something I may never know, unless if at some point down the line something happens and that name comes into play again. I get if you, the listener, thinks that this is all made up. I wish it was. But this shit happened and it confused me and in a way changed my views on people who class themselves as a medium. Whether this proves that there is such thing as an afterlife or that some people just have this mystic power of knowing shit that otherwise they wouldn't have any information on is a completely different thing. I do think that humans have the capability of having strange mental powers. I even have one myself. It's a little difficult to explain, but every so often I find myself thinking or dreaming about something completely random happening, and in the following months that exact thing will happen in reality, giving off a weird deja vu feel, and the hairs on my arm and neck stands up when I realise in some way or another I've lived that exact moment before. I've always called it reverse deja vu. Very strange. And it turns out that thing is actually called deja rêve. Learn something new every day. So all in all, 2015 has been a fucking roller coaster of emotions, and a year that I'd rather forget even happened. From losing my mother, to getting engaged, to living my dream of going to Egypt, to visiting my grandfather, to losing my grandfather, to gaining sisters. I'm sure you can see why this year alone really fucking confused me. There will never be another year like it.